nature of public sphere is constantly being changed. So those problems which were expressing in early 20th century, because of the change in the public sphere, are now being revealed in digitally constructed public sphere. So I'm just providing you an history of exclusion of ethics. Okay, the central idea of my presentation is that the contemporary discourse of applied ethics is structurally procedural. It's not inclusive. And in the second part, I'm going to identify different challenges to applied ethics, which question the very foundation of normative intervention in public sphere. And 4 fundamental challenges have been identified here. So before we start our presentation, I have a question for the audience. And I would like to have answer from at least 2 different perspectives. So my question is it possible to play gambling honestly? Is it possible to play gambling honestly? Yes, yes. And how many of you think that no, it's not possible to play gambling honestly? There are people who are not saying either of the question. They are not referring to any of the possibility. How many of you think that yes, it is possible to play gambling honestly? Fine. So, and those who think that it is no, it is not possible to play gambling honestly. Fine. So first we will take the point of view of those who think that yes, it is possible to play gambling honestly. But okay, what do you think? Why? How is you can play gambling honestly? No, don't explain. I know, and I know how to play those.
Like passing by motorcycle.
No. I'm not asking you that what kind of gambling you are pursuing. I'm asking you, is it possible to play gambling honestly? If yes, then how? How it is possible to play gambling honestly? Okay, fine. What do you think? How you can play gambling honestly? नहीं हिस्ट्री नहीं. आप गैम्बलिंग को ऑनेस्टली कैसे खेलते हैं? खेल सकते हैं. डरने की बात नहीं है, कोई कुछ नहीं कहेगा. If you are playing gambling, अच्छा चलो ठीक है, तुम बताओ. Yes. Follow कर रहे हैं. Yes. If you follow the rule and you are playing gambling as per rule prescribed in a given framework, and all the participants are reflecting and exercising and playing gambling as per the rule that has been prescribed before the play, people will consider it that they are playing gambling honestly. It means that they are defining honesty by virtue of the procedure. So whenever you try to define something by virtue of the procedure, that virtue will be defined as procedural virtue. It is procedural. So generally people approach ethical issues in contemporary world from the perspective of the procedural dynamics of what ought to be and what ought not to be. So what ought to be in this particular example of gambling, what ought to be that you should play gambling by virtue of the prescribed procedure acknowledged in a given system. Do you agree that honesty is a core issue of ethics? Do you think? Do you agree with this? Yes. It means that if you can play gambling honestly, it means that you are playing gambling at the same time you consider yourself as ethically sound individual or morally sound individual. It means that when you approach right and wrong and good and bad issues in a procedural manner, it means that your approach is being recognized as exclusive approach. And exclusive approach is the approach which consider the fundamental question is how, not why, not why not. That is the first thing. I'll explain it to you later on. And those people who think that no, it is not possible to play gambling honestly, what was their position? Why they were saying that no, it is not possible to play gambling honestly? Yes, 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 we will have point of views. Yes.
I believe that you cannot honestly do something or ethically do something that is substantially unethical.
Substantial.
There's a contradiction in terms.
Substantial. Fine. Yes.
I think that
I
think all such activities that cause someone a heartburn are unethical. Because in gambling, one is bound to be the winner and the other is bound to be the loser. So it's that structure of harm that makes it unethical.
So if anybody else, yes, yes.
So basically in gambling, a person wants to maximize his benefit. So if he wants to maximize his benefits, he would obviously have to go at any length to obtain that, and that means that he has a very self-centric approach, and he would always want that the other person loses it and that he gets everything. So he would have to go against the rules, even if he complies with it in the first place.
So you think that if person is gambling means that he necessarily become unethical in one or one of the manifestation of that in his existence. There is an intrinsic relationship being ethical while pursuing a gambling. Is that what you're saying? ठीक है. Is there anyone else? Okay, fine. If we are saying that no, it is not possible to play gambling honestly, all the three participants, are you going to indulge in this discourse that what should be the procedure of gambling? No. It means that the procedures which are being underway regarding the determination of the honest expression of gambling, you don't get involved in it. Why? Because you think that substantively it is intrinsically wrong. So if something which is intrinsically wrong, so there is no need to question about the procedural dynamics. So there are kinds of people. Some people look at things in a procedural manner, and some people look at things in a speculative manner. So in philosophical sense, the first three participants who were saying that yes, it is possible to play gambling honestly, what actually they have done, they have exclusive they were focusing on the exclusive dimension of the activity, but they have ignored the speculative part. And they think that through the procedure, we can control the corollaries and the mishap which may cause harm to the people. So they were focusing on the procedure. The other members, they are saying that no, we are not going to discuss the procedural dynamics of gambling. Why? Because it is substantively wrong. It is essentially wrong. It is inclusively wrong. So we are not going to discuss the procedural dynamics of the discourse. Okay, fine. So there are two or three kinds of questions which are central among human beings. One is the how, the other is what and why. Historically speaking, the approaches, the speculative approach, it focuses on the issue of what and why. What and why. They think the fundamental question is what and why. Otherwise, you cannot indulge in the procedural dynamics. First, you have to resolve that what actually the reality is, why we are doing this. If you are not interested at all, the activity which is going to be discussed, then you are not going to discuss the procedural dynamics of that thing. But unfortunately, what is happening in contemporary world, the question of why and what has been dominated by the question of how. And when you are dealing with the question of how, you are just focusing on the procedure. So there are people who think that if we are following the procedure of a given framework, we can involve and we can indulge in that activity in an ethically sound and morally sound manner. So whatever happening all around the world, people are directly involving with their hearts, with their soul, and with their moral commitment. But what actually they are not questioning, generally they are not questioning the substantive and the speculative side of their of the activity in which they are pursuing. So generally the order of question in classical sense, the question of what and why were prior to the question of how and what ought to be and what ought not to be. So if we are living in a complex world, the problem of post-colonial societies is that we are experiencing and we are discussing the problem of postmodern world in a pre-modern society. So whenever we try to question the legitimacy of the question posed by the post-metaphysical world or by the post-industrial societies in a post-colonial society, which is not actually in the process of excluding all the foundations they have, but at the same time their foundations were not as they were 200 years back. So people think that you don't qualify to participate in that kind of discourse. Why? Because you don't know how things happen in this world. You don't know how things happen in this world. आपने ये जुमला बहुत सुना होगा पाकिस्तान, आपको पता ही नहीं है दुनिया में हो क्या रहा। सुना है जुमला आप लोगों ने सबने सुन लिया? सही है। तो जो आपको पता नहीं है दुनिया में क्या हो रहा है, इसका मतलब ये है the procedural dynamics has substantively been changed, but because of your post-colonial underdeveloped particularities and specificities, you don't know what actually happening in the world. So the question arises that how you are going to relate yourself to that problem. So the exclusive approach, as we have discussed, that exclusive approach primarily concerned with the question of how. It means that it is only exclusive to the procedure of doing something. The do's and don'ts of an act determine the moral legitimacy of given activity. It is not concerned with the question of why and what. In the context of in this context, if someone, for instance, businessman or doctor or scientist or journalist, etc., is following the SOPs, then he will be considered as ethically sound. So what actually we consider as ethical person in exclusive context is that whether you are following SOPs or not. If you are following SOPs, then you will be recognized as ethical. So there is a pseudo ethical and pseudo morality, or a hollow morality and hollow ethics has been presented because of the domination of the exclusive approach. Whereas in so the limit of the exclusive approach is that if you discuss the exclusivity of gambling, it will be legitimized by virtue of the procedure you are following. But the inclusive approach, the speculative approach, first question the substantive foundations of the procedure, then they move on to the procedure. यानी कि अगर कोई आदमी ये कहता है कि भाई जुआ खेलना ही गलत है, तो फिर उसके जुए के तरीक़ेकार पे क्या डेवलपमेंट. अब फर्ज किया कि आप ये क्वेश्चन उठा देंगे इस्लामी तारीख में जुए खेलने की इम्कानात, तो कहेंगे इस पे ज्यादा काम नहीं हुआ. ज्यादा काम इसलिए नहीं हुआ कि मुसलमानों ने उसको सिग्निफिकेंट ही नहीं समझा. So the growth in the field of gambling is not possible because of that barrier, the substantive barrier. So the substantive constraint, the procedural dynamics have not been developed. But the world to which the Muslim community and the Muslim intelligentsia is confronting is the world which has been dominated by the exclusiveness of the expression. The exclusiveness of expression is going to be discussed in the later section of this presentation. But the issue is that because of the exclusiveness, lot of possibilities have been emerged to determine the ethical particularity of a given activity. तो जैसे जैसे historical process develop हुआ, उस exclusivity ने अपने आप को express किया. So if if we look at the inclusive approach, in inclusive approach, we are primarily concerned with the question of why and what before addressing the issue of how. It means that it is not only the exclusiveness to it is not only exclusive to the procedure of doing something, rather it is more concerned with the substance of the procedure. The do's and don'ts of an act in this approach is secondary issue. The moral legitimacy of a given activity is derived from its theoretical consistency. Therefore, the speculative foundation are necessary to be sound. Since it is concerned with the question of why and what, therefore, SOPs are not enough to ethically justify an act or policy. In this context, if any activity which is following the standard operating procedure is not a guarantee that the activity and its corresponding decisions are ethically sound, or if a business policy is consistent with the standard operating procedure, it is not enough to consider it as ethically sound. So in the first part of my presentation is just to identify, to check our ethical foundations, because the world in which we are living is being driven by the procedural framework, and the procedural framework guarantees ethical consistency by virtue of act as per the procedure that has been prescribed in a given framework. अगर किसी सिस्टम के अंदर कोई स्टैंडर्ड नॉर्म्स हैं और आप उनको फॉलो कर लेते हैं तो आप एथिकली साउंड हैं. But from where those ethical standards have been set, from where those SOPs have been derived, that's the domain of the speculative dimension. But in contemporary world, the speculative side are not generally being discussed in a legitimate public sphere. So the public sphere is being constructed after the speculation has been done. So very few people are directly participating in the speculative dimensions, and the public sphere is going to be determined by the exclusive dimension of the given activity. So what are the challenges that have been emerged out of this exclusivity? So the first point which we are referring to is that ethics has substantively been excluded from the public sphere for the last 200 years. This process is being underway. So I'm just providing you a brief sketch of how the ethics has been excluded. For instance, if you read any introductory book on applicatory ethics or bioethics or business ethics or legal ethics or whatever, so you will find these 4 different challenges initially, and these initial challenges provided to the student a framework that how these activities have been contested once that these activities are substantively or inclusively wrong, but even then these activities have been performed and they have been substantiated in contemporary discourse. The first challenge is a logical positivist challenge. The analytical philosophy is one of the most powerful philosophy during 19th century. So the colonial master who were developing education system in our part of the world early 19th century, they were being dominated by the mechanism of analytical philosophy. So analytical philosophy actually questioned the fundamental legitimacy of ethics in itself. So for instance, the logical positivists believe that how we can differentiate meaningful statements from meaningless statements, how we can differentiate the meaning, what should be the standard. At speculative, they were asking this question, how we can differentiate meaningful statement from meaningless statement. So logical positivists come to the solution that all those statements which are empirically verifiable or falsifiable will be considered as meaningful, and all those statements which are neither empirically verifiable nor falsifiable will be considered as meaningless. And because of this criteria of meaningfulness, the whole discourse of spirituality, the whole discourse of religion, the whole discourse of ethics, and the whole discourse of aesthetics have been excluded or have been eradicated from the domain of meaningfulness. So one of the famous phrase of Wittgenstein, he said that ethics, aesthetics, and mysticism lie on same foot because they all equally nonsense. Why? Because when you talk about God, the God is one. Do you agree with this? Do you consider it as meaningful or not? According to the logical positivist statement or SOPs, this statement is meaningful for you or not, according to logical positivist SOPs? Huh? No. Why not? Because it is not empirically verifiable. It means that it is neither right nor wrong. It is meaningless. It means that whole discourse, all the discourse which is being underway regarding the oneness of the God or polytheism or pantheism, etc., the whole statements, whole set of the statement that has been produced humanity for the last 2,500 years, that is in fact a bundle of meaningless set of statements, and that has been excluded from an epistemologically sound and meaningful discourse of human existence. Respecting parents is good. It is meaningful statement or meaningless statement from your perspective? Respect your elders is good, meaningful, and from the SOPs of a logical positivist, why it's not meaningful? Because the goodness is neither empirically verifiable nor falsifiable. Have you seen respect by your own eyes? You can see respect? Is it possible for you to see respect? You don't see respect. You cannot see respect. है भाई, तुम लोग किसी अगर ये लोग आके मुझे जूते मारना शुरू कर दें यहाँ पर, तो तुम लोगों को लगेगा मेरी बेइज्जती हो रही है या नहीं? लगेगा तो देख ली ना तुमने बेइज्जती। पाकिस्तान में बेइज्जती देखने के रोजाना मवाके, हजारों मवाके, तो तुम कैसे कह रहे हो कि बेइज्जती नहीं देखी? लेकिन हाँ, यस, जो चीज तुम देख रहे हो वो ये कि एक बॉडी दूसरी बॉडी पर कुछ एक्टिविटी कर रही है, बस यही देख रहे हो। लेकिन जो सेंस है that it is ethically right or ethically wrong, you cannot see it. Therefore, ethics is meaningless set of a statement according to logical power. It's a 19th century discourse. So it's quite, obsoleted ideas, but you have to know that. And the third, beauty lies in the eyes of beholder. असली हुस्न सादगी में होता है. The real beauty lies in modesty. मीनिंगफुल है, मीनिंगलेस है? ये आप लोगों के हिसाब से मीनिंगफुल है, मीनिंगलेस? मीनिंगफुल है लॉजिकल पॉजिटिविस्ट एसओपीस के हिसाब से. The whole literature, the whole poetry is a set of meaningless statement. So the first thing, what kind of statements are meaningful? Only scientific statements are meaningful because they are empirically verifiable or falsifiable. In fact, later on, the idea of falsity, falsificationism was challenged within the domain of science. So this idea, but that idea was being carried out by many thinkers, and they're pursuing their activity. So the whole the challenge of ethics and morality was persist in the domain of language and linguistics and literature for the last 200 years. The second challenge is the challenge posed by the rightists. The rightists, they are working in another domain, and that is the domain of market or business. The rightists are those people who believe that market is a self-sustained system driven by the laws of demand and supply. So there is an efficient market mechanism which is being underway, and any moral or any religious or any political intervention in the domain of the market will directly affect the efficient market mechanism. So if you are intervening in the market through a moral perspective or through a religious perspective or through a political perspective, you are going to disturb the market efficiency, and market is intrinsically self-sustained. The distribution of goods and resources by virtue of these laws of demand and supply, guarantee the possibility of justice. So if you are getting less from the market and someone is getting more from the market, it is justice. It is intrinsically, there is no further way, there is no further need to encroach or intervene in the market to readjust the disparities and discrimination which is caused by the market. So the early 18th century, this argument is being underway, and although lot of discourse has been made, but still the rightist position is being incorporated in the policy framework of 21st century as well. So the whole domain of the market is also being challenged by the rightist or by the free market economist or by the capitalist in contemporary discourse, that market is self-sustained system and there is no need to intervene in the market. Selling and buying is the rationality, and if you are getting more from the market, it is justice. So what actually the value of the market is? Merit and efficiency. Merit and efficiency. If you are competitive, you will get more. If you are incompetent idiot, you will get less. So there is no need of ethical intervention in the domain of the market. The rightists are responding to this issue, and they are saying that if you are teaching ethics, if you are discussing morality and ethics in a system which is structurally capitalist, it means that you are actually participating in the process of exploitation, and therefore you are actually the instrument of those who are exploiting the masses. Therefore, the leftists believe that participating in any kind of discussion that what is ethical in capitalist system and what is not ethical, they are saying that this structure is intrinsically wrong. The matrix is intrinsically wrong and exploitative. So first we have to destroy the system. First we have to destroy the system. Then we will talk about ethics and morality. So in this system which is being underway, is structurally wrong, it is structurally exploitative, it is structurally discriminated. Therefore, one should not participate in that activity at all. So they think if logical positivists believe that if you are participating in ethical discourse, you are doing a meaningless activity. And the rightists are saying if you are participating in ethical discourse, that means that you are actually questioning the legitimacy of meritocracy and efficiency, and you want to provide an unjust system to feed those people who are incompetent and who are idiots. Leftists believe that if you are participating in ethical discourse in a system which is intrinsically capitalistic, it means that you are participating in the process of exploitation. So there is no need to participate in ethical discussion. First, you should move on to the discourse of a revolution or deconstruct the system, then talk about ethics and morality, etc. That process is being underway for the last 200 years. And the contemporary challenge that has been developed by the deontologists of 20th century, for instance, John Rawls, they believe that the justice has nothing to do with moral desert. The public discourse and the system of justice should be neutral regarding the issue of right and wrong and good and bad and ethical or unethical. Why? Because the core concern of justice is political. So the domain of language has excluded the meaning of ethics from their discourse. The whole discourse of market, that has excluded the ethics, and the whole discourse of justice has been excluded by John Rawls in his 2 principles of justice. What is the fundamental, what actually the fundamental justice you are presuming in contemporary world is respect of human rights. How many of you agree with this, that we should respect human rights? How many of you? Why we should respect human rights? Why we should respect human rights? Huh? No. Yes, of course, we are all human. So when human beings have not been respected in human history, when? It's a 20th century discourse. When human beings have not been respected. So if someone is coming to you and is asking that we should respect other individual, that is the fundamental ethical principle one should have. It creates an illusion in your mind that there were the time when people were not respected just because they were human. So how you are going to respect human? How you can respect humans?
By making sure that their needs are fulfilled.
No, in this human rights framework, respect, yes. गलत क्या होता है ह्यूमन राइट्स में? ह्यूमन राइट्स फ्रेमवर्क में गलत,
हम तो छोटे या हमसे बड़े होते हैं, अगर वो कभी भी कोई गलती करते हैं, इट्स पॉसिबल कि ह्यूमंस आर नॉट परफेक्ट, तो हमें सबसे पहले आसान तरीका यही होता है कि हम उसको आराम से समझाएं. हम पहले इस बात पे गुस्सा हो जाते हैं कि यार ये क्यों किया है.
जी, मेरा क्वेश्चन ये था कि ह्यूमन राइट्स फ्रेमवर्क में तो उसकी एक्सप्रेशन जो है वो सिर्फ ऑफिस में तो नहीं होती ना, घर में भी होती है. हाउ यू आर गोइंग टू रिस्पेक्ट ह्यूमन राइट्स एट योर होम? तुम में से कितने लोगों के जो अम्मा अब्बा हैं वो तुम्हारे पासवर्ड जानते हैं फेसबुक के? तुम्हारे अम्मी अब्बू जानते हैं, और तुम्हारे, बस तुम लोगों के क्यों नहीं जानते? जी, ये है एथिक्स, इसे कहते हैं एथिक्स. It is immoral to know the password of your sister, of your daughter, of your husband, of your family member. नहीं, मैं ये नहीं कह रहा. मैं कह रहा हूं तुमने तो अच्छा किया, बता दिया, अच्छा किया. मैं कोई बुरी बात नहीं कह रहा, क्योंकि जिसको उसमें घुसना होगा वो तो सिस्टमैटिकली घुस जाए, वो कोई ऐसा मसला नहीं है. पासवर्ड सिर्फ माँ बाप को दूर रखने के लिए होता है. तो if you look at the life in which you are living in, there is a morality that you should increase the area of non-encroachment of an individual constantly. यानी कि तुम अपने एरिया ऑफ नॉन एनक्रोचमेंट को इंक्रीज करो. तुम्हारा पर्सनल लैपटॉप हो, तुम्हारा पर्सनल मोबाइल हो, तुम्हारा पर्सनल ट्विटर अकाउंट हो, तुम्हारा पर्सनल, तो तुम्हारी जो पर्सनल लाइफ है वो सिक्योर होती चली जाए, प्रोटेक्ट होती चली जाए, और उसमें कोई दूसरा इंसान इंटरवीन ना करे. तो एथिक्स क्या होगी? एथिक्स ये होगी कि अगर आप इंटरवीन कर भी सकते हैं तो आप नहीं करें. तो अच्छी मां कौन होगी? अच्छी मां कौन होगी? अच्छी मां कभी इंक्रोच नहीं करेगी मेरा बच्चा क्या गुल खिला रहा है. अच्छा बाप कौन होगा? जो इंक्रोच ना करे. ये प्रोसीजरल है, सब्सटेंटिव नहीं है. यानी कि मेरी बीवी को पता होना चाहिए ना कि मैं कहां हूं, लेकिन अच्छी बीवी वो होगी जो उम्मीद रखे, बस उम्मीद पे कायम रहे. उम्मीद पे दुनिया कायम है, इस उम्मीद पे रहे कि मेरा शौहर अच्छी ही जगह होगा. लेकिन अगर मेरी बीवी ये पूछ ले कि तुम कहां थे, तो ये मेरा राइट ऑफ सेल्फ डिटर्मिनेशन वायलेट हो गया. राइट ऑफ सेल्फ डिटर्मिनेशन and the protection of the right of self determination is actually the ethics of the contemporary world prescribed by Rawlsian system of justice. And what actually right of self-determination is. Every individual, keep that in your mind, every individual is absolutely free to determine his own conception of good, subject to the condition that the only public good is will to freedom. It means that if an individual is pursuing religious prayers in his private sphere, it is good, not because offering prayer is intrinsically good, because he is offering prayer without affecting the affair of the other. That's why it is good. So there are multiple spheres of existence. So if somebody is offering prayers because he determined this good in his own private sphere, that is good for that specific individual. If somebody is drinking wine in his public sphere, it is good for that individual because that has been determined by that specific individual. And if somebody is doing research, it is good for that specific individual. Why? Because he has determined research as good for that individual. And one of the most remarkable example Rawls give, that if somebody is counting the blade of grass in his individuality, we don't have the right to say that the choice made by the individual is some way inferior to the choice made by the other individual. It means कि अगर कोई बंदा उल्टा लेटकर घास के पत्ते गिन रहा है तो वो इक्वल है उस आदमी के जो कि नमाज पढ़ रहा है, जो शराब पी रहा है, जो रिसर्च कर रहा है. इसका मतलब ये है कि in deontological conception of justice there is no moral or ethical priority of one good over the other. The choice of good is just like a choice of coffee and tea, just like a coffee and tea. When you people ask you that would you like to prefer coffee or tea, so you would say that I prefer coffee in morning and tea at night. Similarly, you can say in this deontological framework that in my personal life I am Catholic, but in my public life I am a Buddhist. There is nothing wrong in it. So in ethical discourse, the personal individuality should be protected and should never ever be encroached by the other. So the world in which we are living in, that has been expressed in Rawlsian framework by a system of justice in which right of self-determination will be considered as the fundamental principle, and right of self-determination presume the priority of right over good. It means that in this framework, good is your personal choice, the right will be determined in the public sphere. And the world of AI is actually following the same pattern. It protects the right and good will be your personal choice. So the Islamist, how Islamist is going to respond to that issue? The fundamental thing Islam has actually focused on is the individual. It is the individual. And the whole Sufiyas and the Akabarin, they were actually working on human heart or human consciousness or human moral life as an individual, because it's not just the ethics which matters in religion. In the religions, what matters is the morality, how you are going to relate yourself to others, and how you are going to relate yourself to yourself, how you are going to relate yourself to real self. That is fundamentally important. But since in Islamic context, you cannot relate yourself to yourself in absence of the God. So the contemporary discourse of AI is actually focusing on the public sphere in which we are living in. So the public sphere is gradually, it's not just secularizing, the public sphere is prioritizing, and the issue of privacy regarding the determination of what ought to be and what ought not to be, and because of its procedural dynamics, it creates an illusion that you are doing something ethical, something moral. So there is a need of a comprehensive mechanism to revisit our speculative dimensions so that the applicatory ethics are going to be pursued. Thank you very much.